welcome back in. We are on to week 4. Season just flies by every single time. But with that being said, we are here to get you ready with our week 4 wide receiver must plays for the week. So let's go ahead and start things off with our wide receiver ones, and they are as follows: Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, Rashee Rice, Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, DK Metcalf, Chris Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, and Garrett Wilson wraps up the top 12 wide receivers. So Cody, hit us with the good stuff on the wide receiver ones this week.
Yeah, we obviously don't have to go into too much detail with these guys. If you have any of them, you are plugging them into your lineups week in and week out. Did just want to mention DK Metcalf. He is wide receiver 7 in points per game among receivers who have played more than one game for the first 3 weeks, carrying a 42% air yard share, a 22% target share. Now gets a matchup against the Lions, who are allowing the third most fantasy points per game to the position. You're talking about a defense that is an absolute pass funnel as well, because they have allowed the fewest points per game to running backs. Also have a 47-point total in this game, which is the third highest on the week. So this is setting up for a nice spot for Seattle's passing offense as a whole, but particularly I like Metcalf here. And the last guy I want to talk about in the top 12 is someone that I was clearly not high enough on, and that was Malik Neighbors. Loved him as a dynasty asset and for his future prospects. But for redraft for this year, I just wasn't so sure on him. I didn't think he'd be able to produce enough with the ugly Danny Dimes targets. Thought that he was being drafted at his ceiling in redraft this season. And boy, oh boy, was I wrong. We're talking about someone who is the wide receiver 1 through the first 3 weeks, has the second highest target share, leads the league in air yard share, second and first read percentage. He's just absolutely balling. Now gets a matchup against a Cowboys defense that just hasn't been the same unit we've grown to expect over the past few seasons. This game's also sitting at a 45-point total, which I was a little surprised to see, but that is one of the higher over-unders on the week. It's clear Neighbors is going to get absolutely peppered with targets, and that is going to be more than enough despite them coming from Danny Dimes.
Yeah, I did a video like early August about my league winners, and Malik Neighbors was one of them. And I got a lot of hate in that video, telling me how stupid I was for thinking Malik Neighbors could, be that good, especially with Daniel Dimes. So far, I look pretty good now. Haters, suck it. But anyways, let's move over to the wide receiver 2s, and they are as follows: Chris Olave, Zay Flowers, Amari Cooper, Mike Evans, Drake London, DJ Moore, Devontae Adams, Jaden Reed, Deontay Johnson, Terry McLaurin, Tyreek Hill, and Jamison Williams. So same deal. Hit us with the wide receiver 2s.
Yeah, I said last week that it was do or die time for me with Amari Cooper, and he came through. Had a top 5 finish. Now gets to go up against a defense that just gave up over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns to Andy goddamn Dalton, which included a 122-yard and a score from Deontay Johnson. Cooper has at least 8 targets through the first 3 games of this year, giving him a 25% target share, but that also comes with a 45.9% air yard share, which is good for the 9th highest among wide receivers. On the flip side of that game, I like Devontae Adams to bounce back in this one as a wide receiver 2. Cleveland was one of the most stifling defenses last year. That has not been the case so far outside of a week 2 performance against a Jags offense that has just been one of the most head-scratching this season. Even outside of Neighbors' massive game last week, they've given up double-digit fantasy performances to 3 different receivers, so I like Adams here. I mentioned Deontay Johnson in passing, and he's someone I really like in week 4, going up against a Cincy defense that can't stop anything or anyone. Johnson had a massive 40% target share last week, and that does not seem like that is going anywhere. It's definitely not going to change with Adam Thielen likely to miss this one with a hamstring injury. Nobody else on the Panthers had more than 5 targets last week. We heard Canales say this offseason that Deontay Johnson was going to be the focal point of the passing attack, and no lies were detected once we finally got to see an offense that was functional with Dalton under center. And lastly, for the wide receiver 2s, Terry McLaurin, he is finally alive. And we saw him used in week 3 more closely to what we've gotten to expect from him over the past few years. In week 2, Terry McLaurin's average depth of target was 3.9 yards. In week 3, that exploded to 24.7. The Cardinals are middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points allowed to wide receivers, but that includes a game against the shaky Bills offense in week one, a Rams offense that literally fell apart in week two, and a Lions team that only dropped back to pass 23 times last week. So I think some of that is a little skewed. There are only two players for the Commanders that have double digit targets through the first 3 weeks, and that's Terry McLaurin and Zach Ertz. We also have a little revenge game narrative here, Kev, with Kingsbury heading back to Arizona. So I'm sure nothing would make him happier than hanging some points on the cards in week four.
Gotta love a good revenge narrative. The only player I want to hit on was Jaden Reed. I'm a little bit higher. It does sound like Jordan Love is going to be able to return this week, and that is why I am so much higher on Jaden Reed than consensus is right now. The last time we saw Jordan Love healthy, we saw that was when Jaden Reed went absolutely nuclear against the Eagles. And so I do really like Jaden Reed. It actually is a pretty big bump to all the Packers pass catchers if Jordan Love
Yeah.
is able to return this week. I know it's a little bit tougher of a matchup, but I do think Jaden Reed would be the guy that I would like the most. And then Christian Watson probably follows that up. Let's keep moving here. Let's move over to the wide receiver threes, and they are as follows: Stephon Diggs, George Pickens, T. Higgins, Rashid Shaheed, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Brian Thomas, Tank Dell, Roma Dunzi, Christian Kirk, Juwan Jennings, Xavier Worthy, and Khalil Shakir. Same dance, wide receiver threes.
Yeah, let's kick it off with Jawan Jennings, who had an absolutely massive week three, putting up 170 yards and 3 scores. Although we're not expecting or trying to call out anything even close to that happening again, he's still a rock solid wide receiver three slash flex option for your teams this week. So you can certainly consider plugging him back into your starting lineup. If he was on your bench last week, I wouldn't necessarily chase it, but like I said, still a solid option for week four. Roma Dunzi, this one is assuming that Keenan Allen is out again, but I like this matchup for the rookie going up against a Rams defense that has allowed the third most fantasy points per game to the position. Seems like Dunzi is more on the same page with Caleb Williams with timing and whatnot compared to DJ Moore. If Keenan is back, this becomes a riskier flex play for Dunzi just because I don't expect them to run a ton of 11 personnel. So I think Keenan Allen and Dunzi will kind of be like rotating through snaps here. So that's just something to pay attention to. Finally, saw some life out of Christian Kirk, although I'm not ready to fully trust in that. We do get a matchup against Houston, and I'm fully expecting Houston to come out and just lay the wood on this team after being basically embarrassed by the Vikings. So there should be another situation and scenario like we saw in week three, where the Jags are going to be playing from behind early and often, which should open things up for more targets for Christian Kirk. And lastly, Khalil Shakir. Been talking about him all off season and throughout the beginning of the season here. That's not going to stop. He is clearly the most consistent wide receiver here for Josh Allen. His ceiling is going to be a little bit capped depending on whether or not he can find the end zone. But if he does, you get a performance like we had last week. So going to have a consistent floor here for you. And if he finds the end zone, you're looking at wide receiver 2 type numbers.
Yeah, the only player that I really want to talk about really quickly was Xavier Worthy. He kind of worries me a little bit just because his usage hasn't really been great. He hasn't seen more than 4 targets in any game. I think for him for this week, anyways, they really haven't opened him up yet, and that's kind of the mo for Andy Reid. He kind of slow plays a lot of things, and especially with rookies, and we even saw with Rasheed Rice last year. Kind of it took till more so the second half for him to really start to be more and more involved in the offense, and I expect that's probably what's going to happen. They do have a bye in week 6. So I think Xavier Worthy's fine as a flex option, but not somebody that I definitely think that you have to play this week, just because I don't think this is the game environment that's really going to push them. So, Cody, do you have anybody past the top 36 wide receivers you really want to hit on?
So this is kind of like more of a wide receiver 2 type of play, but I did just want to bring up the situation to pay attention to with Jordan Addison and Jalen Naylor. Seems like Addison could be returning this week. Kevin O'Connell said that he is optimistic and hopeful that he is able to return. So if he is, I think Jordan Addison kind of goes in like that wide receiver 2, 3, like fringe range. And then if he is not able to play, they keep him out for an extra week. Jalen Naylor will be solidly in that wide receiver 3 range for me. He's produced pretty well through the first 3 weeks. Wandell Robinson, feel better about him in full PPR leagues and half PPR, but we now have 2 or 3 weeks where Robinson has seen at least 8 targets. Daniel Jones looks for him when he is under duress, and the Cowboys lead the league in pressure percentage. So this could be another spot to look at Robinson if you need to. Same thing with Demario Douglas. We finally saw him come to life a little bit and show what he had done as a rookie. Went 7 for 69 on 9 targets last week. Now gets a matchup against San Fran. Fully expect San Fran's defense to bounce back in this one as well. So I think you could look to him if you're in a deeper league. And then also Michael Wilson going up against the Commanders. We obviously saw Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase get back on track in that matchup. And I think this is a situation in a game where Wilson can build on what he did last week, going 8 for 64 on 9 targets against the Lions. So those are a couple plays further on down the list that I like for this week.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that I wanted to hit on here, kind of, going a little bit later. Ishivash from Cincinnati. I mean, he had a really solid game last week. I know T. Higgins is now back, but I think in matchups where they're pushed, and maybe Carolina can do the same because I mean Carolina definitely looks a lot better, but he still has double-digit PPR points each of the last 2 games. And last week he saw 7 targets, 5 catches, 52 yards, and a touchdown. Now has 3 touchdowns on the season. So I definitely think he's going to continue to be a weekly flex option you can look at, kind of playing that Tyler Boyd type role where he's going to be running a lot from the slot. The Bengals play a lot of 11 personnel. Another option, not somebody that I think you're going to play, but I definitely think somebody that I want to have rostered is, and I kind of mentioned on the waiver show, but I want to mention it again, and that's Xavier Legette. Well, I mean, with Adam Thielen now missing for the next 4 games because he got placed on IR, I definitely think there's a lot to like here. He actually played most of the routes once Adam Thielen went down, saw 3 targets. And so I do really like Xavier Legette as an option. Maybe not this week, maybe not somebody you have to plug in your lineup. That's probably a little bit too thin, but definitely somebody that I want to stash because I think he could have a bigger role as the year goes on. I mean, we're talking about a rookie wide receiver, first round pick for them, and so I do think that he is kind of an interesting play now that this offense actually looks functional. But past that, like I said, I really am going to try, like, unless I have some really reliable options, probably to play running back right now because the wide receiver position and really just scoring overall in the NFL is down right now. Passing numbers are down. So it's been pretty frustrating for a lot of the wide receivers that you may have. And so I think running back right now are a little bit better bet. And that being said, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content. If you have any questions, start-sit questions, leave in the comments section below. If not, we'll be live again on Wednesday night to answer all your questions and once again on Sunday. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Like I said, we'll see you on the next one. Bye.